So welcome to 2025. I'm very excited about this year. I feel like it's going to be good. I mean, having said that, I remember saying the exact same thing on 2020. Like, I was like, oh, 2020 is going to be such an awesome year, such a great year. And I was very excited. I'm basically excited about every year, no matter what the year is. But I do, obviously, we've been through a lot of stuff in the last 5 years in the world. And I feel like this year there's a bit of a turnaround in those things. Okay, so we're going to think about motivation. And it's really just about the 5 elements. So I'm not going to write a lot of stuff on this board. I just want you to get a visual picture of the elements. So you won't need to even see this too much. It's just more to have that visual representation of them going around in that circle. If you've followed any videos that I've done before, you would see that circle. You would know what that means. And in Chinese medicine, they call that the generating cycle. So it's like each in turn generates each other. The video I did put out yesterday on depression actually has quite a lot of information about this. And that's what sort of sparked my idea to do this video, because I thought, well, it's not, you don't have to be depressed to kind of get the benefit of that kind of education, I guess. And you know, we can all get into a state of, I wouldn't say depressed, but just feeling not there. Like you feel like my mojo's not there. I feel flat. I don't feel, ready to rock and roll. So at any point you can put the questions in the stream, that's fine. And I will answer some other questions, not about this topic as well, but I always like to have a topic to kind of start with, because people might be jumping into this later on, I guess, or whatever. Get the conversation going. So we're thinking about wood as the primary thing, right? That is where motivation comes from. So the concept of life planning, direction in life, seeing yourself in the future, having a plan. So if you might have a friend that says, you know, they just always have that 5-year plan or that 10-year plan, and you're like, man, how can you see so far ahead, or even a bigger plan? Those people probably have a very strong wood element going on, right? They had that wood element aspect, which is in all of us. Okay. So it's not like that's special for that person, but we all have that ability to have that is particularly strong. And one of the things we can kind of do to learn or to help ourselves with these things is get around other people that are good at those things and ask them how they are, how do they get to that place? Like how learn from them. Just as much as they can kind of learn from you about your traits and your things that you're good at. So let's think about motivation, right? You want to have the ability to kind of do something. And there's part of it is momentum. Once that's going, it can be easier to generate that. So before we get to motivation, we kind of have to have the will, which is the water, right? And it's not a Chinese medicine saying, but where there's a will, there's a way, right? So that's kind of where it starts, right? The will, the or the will, and the wood, the movement. I put motivation there in case you can't read that. So we kind of think about let's think about how could we get that will, right? You have to know that you want that thing. But let's say you do. Let's say you think, I just don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want my life to be as, sad as it is, or I would like things to be better, or I would like something to change. And if you don't know how to go about that change, I'm going to give you something that's from psychology that's very powerful, that is a tool you can kind of draw from. But if you're at that point where it's all too hard and you've got no inkling of anything, this video may help you, or you may need to see a practitioner, not necessarily a Chinese medicine practitioner, but someone who either A, can kind of talk to you, so a counselor, a psychologist, some kind of mental health professional that can help you do that. Even a life coach, that kind of thing could help with this. On where do I start, right? But there's a concept in Chinese medicine about the interconnection between our physical body and our emotional body. So if we do things in the physical, that can then generate the emotional or help the emotional. So in this case, there's 2 things I would suggest you do, and they're like in opposition, but they would help each other. So movement is going to stimulate wood, but stillness is going to stimulate water. So water's the the precursor, that's the will. Now, what is stillness, right? Okay, I used to get really annoyed when people say, oh, just, I live in stillness. I'm like, well, how do you get around every day? How do you go about your business? Like, that's stupid. I still am very skeptical of these sort of new agey sort of movements. But then as I get older, I realize like, okay, there's some wisdom in some of that stuff as well. It's just how it's packaged might not be for me. I'm not their target market. So what does that mean? It means like stopping your mind from just being, I don't know, bamboozled by just BS stuff like scrolling on TikTok, like, watching video after video. I find myself doing that on YouTube because I tend to be more of a person that watches a lot of YouTube than anything else. But you like being in that in something that's just filling up the mind for no apparent reason, right? No purpose for you. Just turn my aircon off. It's getting a bit cold and dry in here on this hot summer's day. So some kind of stillness. Now, water is associated with the water element. Oh, that's surprising. Pearl of wisdom there. But what is water, right? So here's a cup of water, and that can kind of be represented as stillness. But think about the flexibility of water, right? The movement of water. Water can be really powerful. Like, it can actually generate electricity, right? It's used to do that. Now, that's out of my purview of explaining how that happens, but it does happen. Water is a powerful force. So it's not just sort of like this wishy-washy, oh, I'll just sit in stillness, do nothing, and my goals and dreams will just come to me. It's not that. There might be a need for some of that stillness to wait for something to arise in that stillness, especially if you are a person that just doesn't allow for that at all. But how could you do that? You could just do that by just doing one thing. So focusing on breathing. Oh, my computer's making a giant sound. Focusing on your breathing. Focusing on sitting in a meditative state, going for a walk. I like to do that in my walk sometimes. You don't have to have 100 other people. I mean, I'm a podcast right now. You don't have to have a podcast in your ears at all times. Having moments of that or parts of that, somewhat in that reflective state, but you're not really trying to think of anything necessarily. That's going to be more the earth element that we're doing that for. It's just allowing the space to be there and being in that space. One of the practices that fosters this is actually yoga. So particularly what's called yin yoga. You're lying there and you've just got, that's literally what yin is. It's like stillness and it's trying to focus on that. So I would encourage you to go on somewhere like YouTube and find a yin yoga practice. They're very easy to do. Get a bunch of pillows and things like that. Now, when I say it's easy, it's actually not. Like I find that the hardest of all the workouts to do because that's not me. And I force myself to do that sometimes because I know it's good for you, right? To lie in that stillness. So that can be part of it. Now, being around bodies of water, let's say being around the ocean, being around a lake, a dam, even having the sound of water for some people, that stimulates that. You might cozy up to the sound of rain. That could be helpful. So those things could be used as perpetuators for that moment of stillness. Acupuncture also can help in this way. So if a patient came to me and said, I need help to get motivated, what would I do? Now, one of the points you could use is kidney 3. It's on your ankle. So if I can try and draw this little picture here, I'm just going to see if that's it will come out. Yeah, so this is my terrible foot. This is, oops, toes are kind of there. The inside of your foot. This little thing is called the medial malleolus, which is the back ankle bones. This is on the inside of your foot, not the outside. And so what you could do is you can just rub your ankles in that area with your thumb and your finger, and then your thumb might be on the outside or the inside, depending on what's easiest for you. You have a point on the other side called bladder 60. So you could use that acupressure as part of your stillness practice, let's say, to help stimulate that. So if I had a patient that came to me, back to that story, that said, I am struggling with motivation, I would be looking within these 5 elements, what's out of balance for them, try to bring that back into balance, and then the motivation should naturally come to them. So that's kind of what you would want to do for yourself if you're watching this and you're thinking, I just want a bit of self-help. Sometimes it's expensive to see a practitioner, or you want to enhance what the practitioner is doing. So you might go and have an acupuncture session and think, wow, I felt really great after that. And another thing that acupuncture will do for many people is it creates that sense of calm, like all the chaos in their mind or the things that we're thinking of prior to the session are sort of like just suddenly go away. And they're like, oh, shit, I didn't know I was feeling like that until I felt the opposite of that, until I felt so calm. So it can be used like that. And then after your session, right, rather than just going about your day, if this is possible, you would then maybe go home or somewhere you feel peaceful in and maybe do a bit of journaling or write that or think about what do I really want for my life. And they're wood things to do. Okay, so that's one way we could try to generate motivation. And then you're kind of thinking, you've got to think about what do I want to do before you're going to get the motivation to do it. And that is in turn that, like, life planning, thinking of something to do, knowing what you want to do, that's all part of that wood. The other way you can do this is directly stimulate wood by just doing exercise, any movement, right? So it could be going for a walk, whatever is you're able to do with the physicality of your body. So if you're super fit and you already do a lot of exercise, you know what works for you, so I'm not going to give you medical advice about what kind of exercise you should do, but some kind of movement is kind of needed to do. I'm just putting my aircon back on because it got hot again. It's so weird here. Yeah, we're in the middle of summer in Perth, in Perth now, so kind of that's what I know. Most of the people watching this channel are in the US or the UK, so they're probably in the cold already in the winter. So yeah, we want to stimulate the wood element directly. Now that would be just doing some kind of exercise. Now, if you do exercise and then that's your time you feel the most inspirational, the most creative spark, the best, that's a good sign that you're in a state of health, for one, like, because if you were weak and deficient, you wouldn't have the energy to do that kind of exercise and you wouldn't feel good from it for sure. So that's a good sign. And as you do that exercise, you would kind of hopefully maybe some ideas would come to you or some thoughts, or you would plan a time after that to sit there and do that. Now, how can you do that? Journaling is one, like you just let yourself free flow write. You could do it by audio. Sometimes people aren't great at writing or they don't feel like good at that. Sometimes I use the notes on my phone. I'm just driving in my car and I just put the recorder on. Obviously, I'm not pressing any buttons while I'm driving. I put it on before I leave the parking lot or whatever, and I will just talk into my phone about the ideas. Now, sometimes I use that, sometimes I don't, but the fact that I've recorded it, I feel like it's safe and secure there, but you're just literally talking it out to yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we talk it out to a friend, and that could be part of it. So there's another little thing I want to let you know about how to give you motivation. This thing is really powerful, but it's not a Chinese medicine directly, but I'll give you how it relates to Chinese medicine. So there's a concept called self-determination theory in psychology, and this was proposed or talked about or decided, I guess, or invented by these two psychologists, Edward Deci and Ryan. I can't remember the first name of the guy. So he proposed that firstly, there's a premise that autonomous motivation is the best type of motivation versus controlled motivation. So what is autonomous motivation, right? It's motivation that's wholehearted, of your own volition. And so it's going to be choiceful. It's going to be enjoyable. So you want to do it. And it's going to be also enjoying, technically, autonomous motivation when you're completely autonomously motivated. You are enjoying that activity for the sake of doing the activity. Whereas controlled motivation, in opposite to that, is that you do the activity for either a reward or to avoid a penalty. So what is that? A speeding fine is a great example. Most countries have speeding fines, right? So the government or the authorities or whatever want people to drive at a certain speed to keep things safe. So they set that speed limit, right? All these things are created and made up, of course. And then they say, if you exceed that speed limit, you'll get a fine. Now, they are trying to enforce that rule because of a good intention, right? So they put that limit there, and then they'll say, they could say, if you adhere to the limit, we'll give you a reward. Now, hands up if any countries do that. Who gives a reward for driving within the limit? So, very, very strangely, and when I tell this story, no one ever believes me, but trust me, this is true. Like, I was driving along once and I just got my license. I had a really old car and I was always worried the police were going to pull me over for something, right? You know, like there was nothing wrong with it explicitly, but you know, when you've got an old car, something can be wrong and you don't even know, especially when you first get your license. You're a female, you don't know much about cars, you know, whatever, like the backlights. Like once I left a funnel inside the oil thing and I didn't put the oil on and the police had pulled me over for something and they're like, oh, we need to check your car. So I lifted up the bonnet and oil had gone all over the bonnet of the car. And they could see that the funnel was still sticking in the oil thing. And, like, they just let me off because they could see I was a ditz idiot. Yeah, the police guy just gave me his number to call him for later to get it inspected. And then my uncle, who's a policeman, said that was probably just for a date. Anyway, I never called the guy back, right? But this time I got pulled over on a very, very misty road and I was like, oh no, what's going on? You know, and the drivers gave me a driving safety award. That was something that was done in cahoots with some kind of like RAC or company or something like that. And they basically said, you know, you can, like we noticed that you were driving slowly in the fog and that was good. And we awarded you this, it was just a little, I don't even still have it, like some paper. And when I told everyone, my friends, they were like, what? That didn't happen. And I was like, yeah, it did happen. I didn't like hallucinate. It did happen. So autonomous motivation, right, is doing something because you want to, like but controlled motivation is doing something you often avoid a punishment. So like, yeah, that speeding, the road safety, most of the time they put a punishment there. So you're driving safely or less speedily or whatever it is to avoid a fine. You don't get a reward if you do the right thing. You get a punishment if you do the wrong thing. So when we're thinking about like things we want to do for the new year, we want to do weight loss, we want to do moving, we want to do, you know, like as in moving as in exercise or do something, then we often it's like, I want the reward. I want, as in, I don't want to do the exercise or the healthy diet. I just want to lose the weight. I want the reward of people saying, "Oh, you look great today, Marie," or feeling good in your body or whatever it is, right? So, like, it's easy. It's possible to get results with that kind of motivation, and every day people do that, and I do that for myself, right? Like, marking assignments, for instance, like, sometimes you start an activity because I've got a deadline, and if I don't meet that deadline, you know, some kind of punishment would happen to me. Now, it's not like a corporal punishment or anything like that, but it's like, you know, someone in your organization might not, you might not look as good as you should look to them. Maybe that's the avoidance of a punishment, right? We're getting into the psychology here, so there can be lots of reasons for these things, that why we do things. If you understand why you do something, it'll be easier to work out what your motivations are and how you can do more of that stuff, right? So Edward Deci and Ryan sort of proposed that controlled motivation is good, but it's not as good as autonomous motivation. And then they say in their writings and their texts and things like that, that you need 3 things to have autonomous motivation. And they have actually proposed that if you don't have these 3 things, you will not be able to have autonomous motivation. And these are really important. I'm going to talk about how they relate to the 5 elements here. So the 3 things for autonomous motivation, right? So that means you're kind of doing something willingly and choicefully because you want to do it. And ultimately you're going to enjoy that activity more than just, you're not doing it for the result or the avoidance of the result. So the 3 things are relatedness, competence, and autonomy. what is relatedness? Relatedness is that you have a sense of being cared for in your world, in your, wherever you are, like in your community, in your household. It's a sense of being connected. It's a sense of belonging, right? And what that does for you is it helps you when you try to make changes. You have a support, right? So you're not in a state of fighting for, I don't know, your existence, your being, right? Now, this isn't something that's easy to just get that, but it is something that this is why it's important to foster good relationships in your life, so that when you need them, when you go through a difficult time, those people are kind of there. So relatedness essentially means this. So if you can answer this for yourself, that means you have relatedness in your life. It means you matter to others and others matter to you. You matter to others and others matter to you. So what that means is if I didn't rock up at my work tomorrow, someone would notice because I matter to them. Like maybe you matter to them because they're like, oh, who's gonna run the store if I don't come to my retail job or something like that. Maybe you matter to them because they worry, what's wrong with Marie? Why didn't she come to work today? In some way you matter, right? You have people in your world in some way. Now, they may not be your people at work. They might be your family. They might be your grandkids. They might be your own children or your sisters or brothers or your best friend or something like that. Or it could be friends at your workplace, right? That matter to you. You care about them. You care if something happens to them. They're not just like, you're not just going about the world with just random acquaintances and no one really matters and no one cares about me. So it's important that you have that in your life. And if you do have that in your life, that's the first part of autonomous motivation. So if you have that, so you feel like you're being included, right? Everyone wants to be part of something and you have something in your life. Now, the more you have of that, great, right? You might have that in your work and you just really love, and that's why people love to go to work, because they have that sense of includedness. They have that sense of like, I matter to them, they matter to me. It's not just about the job that we do, right? That is part of, if you want to build a workplace where people wanted to come to it, you will make them matter to you and you matter to them. Okay, the next one is competence, right? So this is partly the environment that you're in, and it's also the skill that you have, and that could be related to the environment that you're in. So a good example of this is mathematics. Okay, there's a skill that I have some ability in. Now, were I to go into a grade 1 classroom, year 1, right, first year of school, whatever, prep school, whatever they call it in different countries, or you would hope, and it's true that, thank you, my mathematics skill exceeds that limit. So that's actually not helpful for me to have the competence so low, so to have the level so low that there's no challenge in that for me. But I do have a mastery of that thing, right? So like I have some kind of level of mastery. Now, if I was to go into, I don't know, a trigonometry class or some kind of like advanced physics class or something like that, even probably a non-advanced, just a physics level 1, my level of understanding might be so low, as in my competence in that area is so low that I struggle, right? So I'm struggling. I'm in a state of struggling. So competence kind of means that it doesn't have to be in every area of your life. Just use that as an example. So for instance, we could talk the same skill in different environments, means whether I'm struggling or I'm thriving in that environment, right? So you should have a mastery of the things that are important to you. And you sometimes find people struggle to motivate, right? And this is where a practitioner can kind of come in, because they feel like, I don't have competence in maybe in anything. And competence could be like, I just don't know what's good for me to do. Like, I want to be healthy, but what is healthy? Like, and they're getting stuck in a rabbit hole of, oh, this diet, this thing, that thing. What's right for me to do? So it's got to come back to a trust with your practitioner as well. Like, you've got to find a practitioner that you trust and that you are going to take their advice, and then they might guide you and say, right, let's do this. And so, sometimes you need people to tell you what to do, because it's helping you gain that competence. But then once you're, hopefully that practitioner is helping you to learn about who you are in that aspect, in that area, so that you don't need them forever, and then you're competent in, right? Like I wasn't always competent in Chinese medicine because I didn't know it. So as you learn the information, you kind of know it, then you become, more and more competent. So that's part of it, right? So if you're in an environment that's always challenging you and you never feel any sense of mastery, let's say you've a good example of this would be, it's a new year, you want to start doing something new for yourself. You just feel like, I don't have the motivation to go do this, a workout program or lose weight or whatever you've decided you want to do. And you just started a new job and it's all hard. You know you can do it, but your competence isn't there. Like you're struggling a little bit. And it kind of like might be a good struggle because you're learning and but you don't feel any sense of mastery there. So until you get that sense of mastery, you're not going to be in a place to kind of autonomously motivate, and that might even be a few weeks. And then that mastery starts to come in and you feel like it makes you feel confident that you are good at that thing. And, that's part of it. So competence is a thing. So it might be just putting the person or putting yourself in the right environment. So I'm not saying go and down 10 levels so that you feel good about yourself, but recognizing that and saying that maybe now isn't the best time for me to make these massive changes in my life because I'm dealing with this other area where I'm trying to regain or I'm trying to gain mastery. So it should be something that's important to you. It might be in your family, right? It might be, things that you're working on, you got teenage kids and it's, you're working on some kind of thing there or something like that, right? So the last one is autonomy. So when you're doing something autonomously, it's choiceful, it's wholehearted, you want to do it, okay? Now it's like you're fully wholeheartedly behind it. It's something you want to do. You agree with it and you like self-endorse that behavior because you agree with it, right? And so it becomes a part of who you are. You're not doing it there's no sense of reward. Like the reward, if there was a reward involved, that would not matter to you. That wouldn't be part of it. That wouldn't be the reasoning why you're doing it. It's like, I'm doing this anyway because I want to do it. So you enjoy doing it. And that's a big part of it, right? You enjoy doing it. Now, you might start something that you know is good for you and then find yourself enjoying doing it, right? Like, for instance, I started carnivore again this year, right? So I did carnivore the year before for 100 days. And then I just fell off the wagon because I ate carbs and it was Christmas and I thought, and now I've realized I don't want to have any of those foods again anymore. And so I'm like, okay, I'm doing a thing called 75 hard again this year. So I started on the 1st of January. Yeah. So sometimes you start something, right? Like the exercise for me was not autonomous. I was doing it for the reward or the carrot dangle or whatever it is, right? But then once you get into it, like every day you've decided I'm going to do this no matter what, I'm going to do it. But then you actually enjoy the actual process. That's part of that is autonomous motivation, right? Like, so you enjoy the way the food tastes, the healthy food, and you're not sort of craving the other food anymore. Well, you're in a state of autonomous motivation there. So there is an aspect, like what Edward Deci and Ryan are saying is like, okay, this is the optimal, this is what we should be aiming for, but there's never going to be a time in your life, I would say. It'd be very hard if you, like, because I said this to my students, I taught this in a psychology class once, and I said, see if you could give yourself that challenge where, everything I do just for one day is autonomously motivated, right? Like, are you going to pay the parking ticket for your car because you want to? Because you choicefully want to do that? No, you do it because you don't want to get a fine. I mean, maybe you love parking, you love paying for parking tickets, right? Or you love paying, whatever that is. Like, there's always things in life that we're going to face that are we're not autonomously motivated. But if we can move things towards that, and sometimes we start an activity or we start a program or something that is controlled motivation to avoid a penalty or get a reward, and then we find ourselves autonomously motivated in it, well, that means you're going to want to perpetuate that activity just for the sake of the activity because you love it so much. So I hope that's been useful and helpful to you, just to kind of understand how that works, right? Because it's super powerful. Like, ultimately, at the start of this, I was saying, like, motivation. We want to get that wood element working, right? And these are some things that we can kind of put in place to kind of activate that motivation. All right, I've got another question here. Shantina says, I've struggled with anemia and I've tried so many ways of eating, but not having a gallbladder has been hard to find the best way to eat for health. Yeah. So I'm not a medical doctor, as in a Western medicine doctor. So you might want to check just, as in one is I'm not your personal doctor either. You're not your Chinese medicine doctor, but not having a gallbladder doesn't mean you can't eat fatty meats and things like that, or you can't eat fat, right? It just means that you don't have that storage of fat there ready to go, right? So your gallbladder basically is like a little sack that contains all of the bile, and then when your body triggers that it needs it, it just all can kind of come out and meet the demand. But your body will still make it; it just kind of trickles out rather than being just there and to flood the system. And your body will adapt to the food, to the diet, right? It will adapt to things, and it takes time for you to adapt to it as well. So I'll tell you what the basic Chinese medicine diet would be. Whether you have a gallbladder or not, it doesn't make any difference. The diet does not change. We don't say, well, you don't have a gallbladder, so this doesn't apply to you. I wish you all happy new year, and hope that today's been useful and helpful to you. If it has, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can put a question here if you're watching afterwards, and I'll endeavour to answer it in a different stream. Be a good idea, and we can do that. But I like these kind of streams where we can have a bit of back and forth with people, which is kind of great. All right, happy days.